There is a moment in these relationships that feels almost unreal. You stop arguing. You stop explaining. You stop trying to fix what never made sense. And suddenly, something shifts. Not always on the outside right away, but underneath it, the whole dynamic starts to crack. Because when she realizes you are truly done, not angry, not threatening to leave, not trying to teach her a lesson, but genuinely finished, that is when the narcissistic woman begins to feel something she has spent a long time trying to avoid. Not love, not empathy, not reflection in the healthy sense. Loss of control. And if you have lived through this, you know how confusing that moment can be. Because for so long, you were the one in pain. You were the one carrying the confusion, the guilt, the emotional weight, the constant second-guessing. You were the one trying to understand why someone who said they loved you could also ignore your pain, twist your words, punish your honesty, and make you feel like the problem for reacting to what they kept doing. So when the balance starts to change, when she senses she can no longer reach you the same way, you may expect clarity. You may expect relief. But what often comes first is something else. More confusion, more strange behavior, more emotional tension. Because narcissistic patterns do not end cleanly. They begin to break apart in ways that are quiet, indirect, and deeply revealing. If you are in that place right now, you need to hear this clearly. You were not too difficult. You were not too sensitive. You were not impossible to love. You were responding to a relationship that kept moving the ground under your feet. You were trying to build stability inside a dynamic that depended on instability. And once you understand that, so much of what happened starts to make more sense. The core of this kind of relationship is not intimacy. It is regulation through control. That is the psychological truth underneath so much of the chaos. A narcissistic person often depends on external emotional reactions to feel powerful, safe, significant, or in command. Attention, reassurance, pursuit, emotional intensity, fear of losing them. These things become a kind of fuel. Not because they are consciously planning every moment like a villain in a movie, but because their entire emotional system is organized around avoiding shame, emptiness, and loss of control. That is why the relationship often felt so one-sided without looking one-sided on the surface. You may have been the one giving more, adjusting more, absorbing more, apologizing more, but the situation was often framed as if she were the wounded one, the disappointed one, the one you had to keep proving yourself to. That is how the imbalance survives. Your empathy gets used against you. Your patience becomes permission. Your desire to repair becomes the very thing that keeps the cycle going. And when she realizes you are done, what collapses first is not always the relationship itself. What collapses first is her certainty that she can still pull you back into your old role. That role matters more than most people realize. In narcissistic relationships, people are often pushed into emotional positions. One person chases, one person withholds, one person explains, one person judges, one person doubts themselves, one person remains just out of reach. Over time, these roles start to feel normal, even when they are destroying you. So when you stop playing your part, when you stop defending yourself, stop rushing to fix, stop reacting to every cold message or sudden disappearance, the whole system gets interrupted. And that interruption can trigger a silent collapse. Sometimes it looks like distance. She becomes unusually quiet, but not peaceful. It is the silence of someone scanning for leverage. She is trying to feel where your attachment still lives. She may pull back to see if you chase. She may become polite and controlled in a way that feels unnatural. She may act as though none of it matters, as though she has moved on effortlessly, as though you were the one who cared too much. But this is often not indifference. It is a test. If she can get you to break first, even just with one emotional message, one long explanation, one plea for closure, then the old structure is still alive. Sometimes the collapse shows up as a sudden softness. After cruelty, there is warmth. After distance, there is vulnerability. After making you feel invisible, there is a message that sounds almost sincere. She misses you. She has been thinking. She understands now. She has been struggling. And for someone with a good heart, this is one of the hardest parts. Because you do not want to be cold. You do not want to punish someone. You do not want to ignore pain if it seems real. But this is where clarity matters. A moment of softness is not the same as accountability. Emotional expression is not the same as change. Missing your access to someone is not the same as valuing them properly. Many people get pulled back here because the contrast feels so intense. The person who is harsh suddenly seems fragile, and your nervous system wants to return to hope. But hope without evidence is what kept you trapped before. Sometimes the collapse comes out sideways through image management. She may start presenting herself as perfectly fine, even thriving. She may become more visible, more social, more polished, more strategically charming. She may tell selective versions of the story that protect her self-image and quietly place you in the role of the unstable one, the cold one, the one who gave up. This is not random either. Narcissistic injury often creates a strong need to restore the self through appearance, admiration, and narrative control. If she cannot control you anymore, she may try to control how the story looks. And if that hurt you, that makes sense. Because one of the deepest wounds in these relationships is not just mistreatment. It is being mistreated and then made to feel unseen on top of it. Being harmed, then doubted. Being drained, then misrepresented. That creates a very specific kind of pain, because it attacks both your emotions and your reality. It makes you question what was true. This is why many people do not feel free right away, even after they leave emotionally. Their body is still carrying the old confusion. Their mind is still trained to scan for shifts, decode messages, anticipate blame, and prepare for emotional whiplash. You may know you are done, but still feel pulled, anxious, guilty, or strangely responsible for her inner state. That does not mean you made the wrong decision. It means your system adapted to survive the instability. Another thing that often happens when she realizes you are done is escalation through provocation. Not always dramatic, but targeted. A cold message, a delayed reply, a sudden accusation, a subtle insult, a reminder of someone else. A statement designed to make you defend yourself. Why? Because if she can still activate you, she can still feel connected to you through control. Negative attention is still attention. Emotional access is still access. The goal is not always reconciliation. Sometimes the goal is simply to confirm that she can still get inside your head. This is where many people misunderstand what strength looks like. They think strength means winning the argument, exposing the lies, making the other person finally admit what they did. But in these dynamics, that urge can keep you tied to the same emotional hook. Real strength often looks quieter than that. It looks like no longer volunteering your peace in exchange for being understood by someone committed to misunderstanding you. It looks like letting their denial belong to them. It looks like refusing to keep auditioning for basic respect. When the narcissistic woman begins to feel that your attention is no longer available in the same way, something deeper often begins to surface in her. Agitation, emptiness, restlessness, resentment, sometimes even panic. Not always because she has suddenly realized your worth in a mature and loving way, but because the mirror is gone. The source of reassurance, reaction, and emotional supply is no longer functioning the way it used to. And without that, she may have to confront feelings she has spent years avoiding. That is the collapse most people never see clearly. It is not always tears. It is not always visible regret. Sometimes it is internal disorganization. A person who looked powerful starts acting inconsistent. A person who seemed so certain becomes impulsive. A person who dismissed you becomes preoccupied with your silence. A person who claimed not to need anyone becomes strangely reactive when they can no longer reach you. The collapse is silent because it often happens behind the mask. And this is important. Her collapse is not your responsibility. Understanding it does not mean managing it. Feeling compassion does not mean returning to the role that broke you. You can understand why someone behaves the way they do without offering yourself as the place where that behavior continues. A lot of people who have been through this carry a hidden fantasy. Maybe if I stay calm enough, explain it clearly enough, love carefully enough, she will finally see. Maybe when she realizes I am done, it will wake her up. Maybe then she will understand what she lost and become the person I kept hoping was in there. Sometimes she may realize she lost control. Sometimes she may realize you were more loyal than she admitted. Sometimes she may even feel real pain. But pain does not automatically create character. Consequences do not automatically create insight. And insight does not automatically create sustained change. That is a hard truth, but it is a freeing one, because it releases you from waiting for someone else's awakening before you allow yourself to heal. The shift toward healing begins when you stop asking, "Why wasn't I enough?" and start asking, "Why was I taught to work so hard for what should have been mutual?" That question changes everything. It moves the focus away from your worth and toward the pattern. It helps you see that the relationship trained you to live in reaction. It trained you to overfunction emotionally while someone else underfunctioned and still expected devotion. It trained you to confuse intensity with connection and self-abandonment with loyalty. As you come out of that, awareness starts to replace obsession. You stop analyzing every mixed signal. You stop treating every crumb of warmth like proof of transformation. You stop confusing access with intimacy. You stop believing that your ability to endure pain means the relationship was meaningful in the way you wanted it to be. And then, boundaries begin to make sense on a deeper level. Not as punishment, not as revenge, not as a tactic to make her miss you, but as a form of reality. A boundary says, "This is where I end and you begin." Your mood is yours. Your chaos is yours. Your interpretation of me is yours. I do not have to climb inside your confusion and live there with you anymore. This is why calm detachment is so powerful. Not coldness, not cruelty, not superiority, just steady emotional non-participation in the old game. You do not need to perform your healing. You do not need to announce your growth. You do not need to convince her that she lost someone valuable. Your life will communicate that more clearly than your words ever could, especially if your peace is no longer up for negotiation. There may still be moments when grief hits you, not because you want the dynamic back, but because you are finally letting yourself feel what it cost. The lost time, the mental exhaustion, the version of you that kept shrinking to keep the peace, the way you learned to doubt your own perception, the tenderness you offered in places where it was not protected. That grief is real. Let it be real. Healing is not pretending it did not matter. Healing is telling the truth about what it did matter for and what it did not. It mattered because it showed you where your boundaries were too weak, where your hope overrode your instincts, where your empathy became self-erasure. But it did not mean you were weak. It did not mean you were foolish. It meant you cared deeply in a situation where care was not being matched with integrity. And now, the work is different. Now the work is learning to trust the calm more than the chaos. Learning to believe consistency, even if it feels less exciting at first. Learning that love does not need confusion to feel powerful. Learning that self-respect is not hardness. It is safety. It is choosing not to return to what keeps injuring you just because it is familiar. So if she is realizing you are done, and something in her is beginning to collapse, let it be hers. You do not need front row seats. You do not need updates. You do not need proof. You do not need to watch someone unravel to validate what you survived. Your clarity is enough. Your exhaustion was evidence. Your healing does not require her confession. What matters now is that you stay close to what is true. The relationship harmed you. The confusion was part of the pattern. Your overthinking was not madness. It was a response to instability. Your pain was not weakness. It was information. And the moment you stop handing your inner world to someone who kept mishandling it, a different kind of life begins. A quieter one. A steadier one. A life where you do not have to decode love. A life where you are not constantly bracing for the next shift in tone, the next withdrawal, the next blame reversal, the next test. A life where peace is not boring, but sacred. A life where your nervous system gets to rest. That is the real ending, not her collapse. Yours is the part that matters more. The end of chasing, the end of explaining, the end of trying to earn what should have been given freely. And in that ending, there is strength. Not loud strength, not performative strength, just the kind that comes from finally seeing clearly and refusing to abandon yourself again. You are allowed to move on without hatred. You are allowed to heal without having all the answers. You are allowed to stop caring whether she fully understands what she did. Some truths do not need her agreement to be true. Some closure does not come through conversation. It comes through distance, consistency, and the slow return of your own mind. And one day, the thing that once consumed you will feel far away. Not because it was small, but because you became anchored in something stronger than it. You will recognize the version of you who kept trying, and instead of judging that person, you will feel compassion. You will understand that they were surviving the best way they knew how, but you will also know that you do not live there anymore. You live here now, in awareness, in self-respect, in emotional independence, in the quiet relief of no longer being controlled by someone else's instability. And that peace, once you really taste it, is something you will never want to trade away again.